Hey guys, I wanted to run through my current projections on where I have the 2020 Senate map. If you have not already done so, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel to continue to get updated election information throughout this 2020 cycle. So as you can see, I've already filled out a number of states. The 8 dark blue ones are safe for the Democrats. The 11 dark red states are safe for the Republicans. And then 2 that are in the likely category for the Democrats come with their incumbents in Minnesota, with Tina Smith and Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire. Those 2 individuals, their approval numbers are quite a bit above water, and these are 2 states that you would generally put more so in the Democratic camp. And then the 4 likely states for the Republicans, down there in the Southeast with the incumbents in Georgia, David Perdue, and Cindy Hyde-Smith in Mississippi. Both of them, their approval numbers are quite a bit above water. And 2 states that are pretty favorable towards the Republicans, Mississippi even more so than Georgia. Georgia actually is becoming a bit more of a competitive state, but in their 2 Senate races that you have there in Georgia, the incumbent David Perdue is looking like a much safer bet than what you have over in the special election. And then Kentucky, a state that you would generally put in a pretty safe category for the Republicans statewide, but actually in 2019, we saw the Democrats win their statewide for the governorship with Andy Beshear taking down a very unpopular incumbent Republican with Bevin. So the Democrats have shown that they can at least possibly win statewide when you're going against a very unpopular individual. So that maybe opens up the door for Amy McGrath to challenge Mitch McConnell, who is the second most disapproved of senator out of all 100 U.S. senators. So that is a race to possibly keep an eye on. But I have my doubts on Amy McGrath's appeal statewide in Kentucky, which is why I still have that as a likely one for McConnell to continue to pick up. And then in Kansas, likely for the Republicans, this is an open seat. It kind of just depends on who wins the primary on the Republican side. If it's Chris Kobach, that opens up the door for the Democrats to possibly win that one. Kobach lost statewide in the governor's race in 2018 to Laura Kelly. He's not necessarily liked all that much statewide. He's kind of the poster child of voter suppression, so we'll keep an eye on that one to see who ends up winning that Republican primary. And then outside of that, that leaves us 10 more races that I think are a bit more on the competitive side. So I'll go through state by state and giving it as either a lean or in a case where it's basically about a 50-50, I'll just give it as a slight tilt over to the Democrats or the Republicans. So starting out there, this race has clearly changed over the past day now that you have the Democratic governor, Steve Bullock, looking like he's going to be challenging incumbent Republican Steve Daines. The Democrats won the statewide Senate election with incumbent John Tester in 2018. And Bullock arguably has more name recognition and a bit more political clout than even Steve Daines does, kind of like the situation you had down in Florida in 2018 with the Republican governor, Rick Scott, claiming that Senate election from incumbent Bill Nelson. Maybe we see a similar type of situation up there in Montana. Now, Montana generally goes towards Republicans, particularly in a presidential race. It's a bit different in their Senate and governor's races. But nonetheless, until I get more in the way of polling data, going to be giving it as a lean for now to the incumbent Steve Daines, and we'll see if Bullock has an opportunity to seriously challenge for this one. Maybe this one goes towards a 50-50 toss-up, or maybe even Bullock has an opportunity to get the lean at some point. But again, it'll have to develop over the course of time. Now, down here in the American Southwest, this has been an area of the country that's been trending really well for the Democrats in recent election cycles. We saw Arizona in 2018, where Martha McSally came up short against Democrat Kyrsten Sinema. And then McSally was appointed to the other Senate seat, and she's up for re-election now in 2020. Technically, she's the incumbent, but she didn't win the election for the race that she currently had, so it's a very weak incumbency. McSally, she's also underwater with her approval numbers, 37% approved to 40% who disapprove, and I feel like she has a tougher Senate challenge this time around going against astronaut Mark Kelly, who has name recognition. He's been fundraising extremely well, and the polling data has been looking pretty good for Kelly. So I'm going to be giving this one as a lean over to the Democrats, and that would be a flip for them. Colorado, kind of a similar scenario where the Republicans have the incumbency, and it's also an incumbent that is underwater with their approval numbers. Cory Gardner, 37% who approve, 40% who disapprove. In Colorado is a bit more to the left than Arizona. It's probably going to end up being John Hickenlooper who's going to challenge for this race, and Hickenlooper has shown that he can win statewide as the former governor. Maybe it's the progressive Romanoff, but he has a long shot to go on and defeat the advantages that Hickenlooper is going to bring into that Democratic primary. So going to be giving this one as a lean over to the Democrats, and that would also be a flip. Now in Texas, We just had the Super Tuesday primary across the state, and the turnout was really good for the Democrats. Now, obviously, you're going to get more turnout in general when you have a competitive presidential primary going on. But it's not like the Republicans didn't have any reason to turn out, because there was also down ballot races on the Republican side, just like on the Democratic side. So really strong positive signs there for the Democratic Party. And it's not just the Latinos that are making Texas more potentially gettable for the Democrats heading to the future, but also the suburban areas in and around the population city centers have been trending towards the Democrats, making Texas a bit more of a conversation. Now, John Cornyn isn't as well known as Ted Cruz is, so his incumbency advantage in 2020 isn't quite as strong as Ted Cruz's was in 2018. Now, we saw a very close 2018 race between Beto O'Rourke and Ted Cruz. Now, whoever the Democrats end up getting to win their primary in the runoff, they're probably not going to have quite as strong of a campaign as what we saw from Beto O'Rourke. I mean, it was a historic what O'Rourke was able to do with grassroots fundraising, so potentially not as strong of a challenger, but also Cornyn, not quite as strong of an incumbency advantage, so we'll see how that one plays out. The polling has generally been pretty positive up to this point for Cornyn. We'll see how that plays out in the coming months as we get more data in the state of Texas. Moving over to Alabama, where you have actually the incumbent with the Democrats with Doug Jones. Doug Jones won the special election over Roy Moore to claim that Senate seat. It's not going to be a special election this time around. He's not going to be going against Roy Moore this time around. And also with a presidential election on the top of the ticket, likely to elevate whoever the Republican challenger ends up being, is looking like an uphill battle here for Doug Jones, who actually does have a positive approval net here at 41% approve compared to 35% who disapprove. It's either going to be Tuberville or Jeff Sessions that he runs against. Going to be a tough one there for Doug Jones. Going to be giving that one as a lean over to the Republicans, and that would be a pickup for the Republican Party. I'm going to leave Iowa and North Carolina for now. I feel like those are essentially pretty much 50-50 toss-ups. I'll go up to the state of Maine. So you have the incumbent with Republican Susan Collins. Her numbers have absolutely fallen off a cliff over the past couple of years. She's now the most disapproved of senator out of all 100 senators. 52% disapprove, 42% approve. We just got some brand new polling data out today that showed Susan Collins' challenger with a 4-point lead, and we've actually seen this in a number of polls where Collins has been losing that race. We'll see who ends up winning the Democratic primary, but this is a tough one for Susan Collins, especially in a state like Maine that tends to be a bit more Democratic statewide. Going to be giving that one as a flip to the Democrats and just as a lean to them. So that's 3 flips already for the Democrats, 1 flip for the Republicans. The state of Michigan, going to be giving it as a lean to the Democrats. Probably going to be John James challenging again in 2020. He challenged Debbie Stabenow in 2018 in the midterms. He lost by around 6 or so percentage points, which was actually quite a bit closer than the statewide governor's race. Gary Peters is the incumbent Democrat running here. He doesn't have all that much name recognition statewide in Michigan. Currently, he's at 37% approved to just 29% who disapprove, with 34% who don't have an opinion of him. But it is also worth noting that Gary Peters won his election bid in 2014, which was an extremely poor turnout year, a down year for the Democrats, and Gary Peters was able to win that Senate race by a rather considerable margin. So don't count Peters out by any means. If he gets challenged by John James, probably something in the way of a pretty competitive race, but you would give the advantage in the state of Michigan to the incumbent Gary Peters. So then I almost forgot about it going down there to the special election in Georgia. And the state of Georgia down here in the Southeast has become more competitive in these statewide races in recent years. We saw this in the 2018 governor's race where Stacey Abrams came up just short. You give David Perdue a better chance to win his Senate seat than this open special election race. It just kind of depends on what the matchup ends up being in that instance, but going to be giving that one as a lean over to the Republicans. And again, really interested to see how that special election plays out and who the candidates end up being. So then that just leaves us with 2 states here with Iowa and North Carolina, and I put them right about in that 50-50 split. You could make an argument going either way. Now, the Republicans have the incumbency advantage with Tom Tillis in North Carolina and Joni Ernst in Iowa, but they're both underwater, and these are expected to be battleground states, potentially competitive head towards 2020, so certainly one to keep an eye on, and I'm looking forward to continuing to get more polling data out from these states to see how those Senate races end up going. But at least at this point in time, I give the slight tilt to Cunningham, who just won the Democratic primary there over Erica Smith. to take down Tom Tillis, who has a very weak incumbency advantage because he doesn't have overwhelming name recognition in the state, and also he's 34% approved to 37% who disapprove. And I just give the very slight tilt in Iowa to Joni Ernst. She's seen her numbers take quite a bit of a hit over the past couple of years. Now Joni Ernst is at a point where she's 37% approved compared to 42% who disapprove. And I also think the Democrats have a decent shot at going on and winning in Iowa, given how much time the party has spent in the state with their Democratic presidential primary over this past year. That can have a carryover effect going to the 2020 general. And before I would give this one either as a tilt or a lean over to the Democrats, I would need to see who the likely contender is going to be to Joni Ernst and what the hypothetical polling matchup would be in that case. But for the time being, that's where I have those really close races in Iowa and North Carolina, which puts us at a 50-50 split. And in that instance, it would come down to who the vice president ends up being for who has control of the Senate to break those 50-50 ties. Obviously, a lot can change in the coming months, but on this map, I have flips for the Democrats picking up Arizona, Colorado, Maine, as well as North Carolina, with the Republicans flipping Alabama, and then also potentially having the possibility of flips in states like Montana for the Democrats. Texas may be a little bit of a longer shot than Montana, but given the demographic trends in this state, not out of the realm of reasonability. Maybe Kentucky ends up being close given the unpopularity of Mitch McConnell. Maybe Chris Kobach ends up being the nominee for the Republicans in Kansas, which opens up that state. And then on the flip side, the state of Michigan, John James competed relatively well against Debbie Stabenow in the 2018 midterms. Maybe he's able to build off of that and maybe even defeat Gary Peters, who has a relatively weak incumbency advantage given his fairly low name recognition in contrast to other senators in their home state. So a lot of dynamic situations still at play here, and this is going to be a fluid scenario here with this 2020 Senate map over the course of time. So I appreciate you guys stopping by, and again, consider subscribing for more, and hope to see you back here for future videos.